Simon, I've pressed the live streaming button, so if you can confirm it's live. It looks to me as though it's saying live at the top of my monitor.
Yes, it's coming through now, Steve.
Perfect. Okay, Chair, I think you're good to start the meeting.
Good morning and welcome to the Virtual Resources Committee meeting being held today. Could I remind members that the meeting is being live streamed on the Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service website, and members of the public will be joining us. Could I also ask that members mute their microphone when they're not speaking, and the chat function is available to inform the chair you would like to ask a question via the chair at the appropriate time. As we have a large agenda today, when referring to pages, could I please ask we use the printed page number at the bottom of our agenda? And for any votes that are required today, we propose to visually indicate with a show of hands at the relevant points. Turning now to item agenda number 1, are there any apologies?
No, Chair, everybody is present. There's no apologies.
Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item number 2, pages 1 to 6. Has everyone seen and read the copy of the last Resources Committee minutes of the meeting held on Monday, the 12th of October that are attached? And do you agree that they are an accurate copy of the meeting?
Yeah, propose acceptance, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Turning to
everybody, Chair, could everybody just put on their video and just confirm, please?
So proposed and confirmed, Chair.
Thank you, Simon.
That's it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Turning to item agenda 3, items requiring, I should say, urgent attention. Do we have any?
Aware of any, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item number 4, the 2021-22 revenue budget and council tax levy setting, which is our pages 7 to 82 of our agenda pack. And Amy, is it Amy that's going to take us through this one today? Good morning, Amy. You're most welcome, you and your team. And over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. So here to present the budget position for the financial year beginning April 2021 for Resources Committee consideration and approval through to the authority. So looking for recommendation on option for council tax precept for the coming year. There is also consideration to fund a temporary increase in the establishment for firefighter development posts, which I'll move on to as we go through the paper. Just to let members know that there is a greater level of uncertainty for the 21-22 budget due to COVID and the impact on council tax and business rates collections. So whilst these risks are highlighted in the paper and quantified where possible, we do have overall confidence that reserves are in place to mitigate against those risks. So that's also highlighted in the paper. So the budget presented today is balanced, but will still require an element of reserves funding, which will increase if council tax is frozen at 2021 levels. So I'm going to move through the paper and happy to take questions at the end, if that's okay, Chair.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you, Amy.
Great. So moving on to page 10 of your packs. Again, I'll be referring to the page number at the bottom. We will see that government growth slightly due to inflation for 21-22, but overall are down 24% over the 6-year period. So there is a significant change to the way that funding is presented in this budget paper due to compensatory grants being received to make up some of the shortfall in business rates and council tax. So what that means is they're actually presented as income in the budget, which is what the accounting regulations dictate, rather than overall funding. So a reminder that each 1% increase in council tax is equivalent to 538,000 in additional funding. There has been a significant impact on council tax and business rates income, and table 2 on page 11 sets out the scale of these. The compensatory grants that we're expecting as income do not fully offset the impacts on and also collection fund deficits are spread over a 3-year period. So not only are we expecting an impact in 21-22, but that's likely to follow through over the next 2 years. And also if the impacts of the pandemic further impact on collection funds and business rates, we'll obviously see some additional pressures coming in there. So table 3 on page 12 outlines the increases and adjustments to the budget alongside savings. We have not included a budgeted pay award in 21-22, and there is an element of risk associated with this because the government direction on public sector pay award freezes could be determined differently by the National Joint Council, but we're confident that if that risk does materialise, we'll have the financing in place. So this means that in 21-22, we haven't had the cost pressure of potential pay awards, and therefore allowed us to reduce the reduce the call on the budget smoothing reserve, and that will mean that there's more available in the future. So if I can move on to page 13, there's a bit more detail about what's included in the budget. And this budget still represents an overall increase in those seen in previous years. So it's an investment in the payment for availability system, so the new on-call model that was launched this year. The service is taking a phased approach to bringing the on-call stations on board, so that's actually happening on a voluntary basis at the moment. And the budget for 21-22 estimates that around half of those stations will be brought online. So the continued investment of 1.4 million is around half of the overall cost of the investment in improving the on-call service. Elsewhere on the agenda, we'll be discussing a proposed environment to put the underspend from this reserve to mitigate against the potential for some of those stations to come online in 21-22. So paragraph 3.8 moves on to the investment in firefighter development posts and also the need to invest in ICT to support smarter working. So that's the Office 365 upgrade and moving across to the team system, which these meetings will eventually move on to. So those are the only areas of investment identified for this budget. This is because obviously knowing that there'll be significant funding pressures, officers have worked with budget holders to really ensure that they're tightening their belts on those budgets and not putting it in increases and requests. So moving on to paragraph 3.9, it outlines the officer request to temporarily increase the establishment for firefighter development posts. And I know this has been discussed at the informal members forums, but the consideration is to invest £415,000 a year for a 3-year period for 12 development firefighter posts. The reason for this is because we have a risk of short notice retirements, which is coming because of changes to the pension regulations in 2022. And it will support service delivery resilience, in particular expertise around fire protection. So that training can take some time in order to allow those officers to get up to speed. And there'll also be increased opportunities to diversify the workforce by increasing the number of recruits. Lee, I don't know if you wanted to talk any more about that.
Thank you, Amy. Chair, just to support that, firefighters only need to give 1 month's notice, and yet it takes 3 to 4 months to train a firefighter, and then ahead of that you've got recruitment timeframes as well. So what this, if agreed by the authority, will allow us to do is to give us a bit of a buffer, as Amy has said, in April 2022, because of some pension changes. We're forecasting quite a few. So this gives us an opportunity to resource up ahead of a potential dip. That is worth just reiterating is that with the increased focus on tech work, that is great. The government have given us some funding for that to support that work post Grenfell, which is welcome. But the practicalities of that means that we are taking firefighters from fire engines and putting them into fire safety roles. That takes a bit of training, and clearly we've got to balance the additional activity in protection with maintaining our operational response arrangements. So it does give us a bit of a buffer. It will allow us to get ahead of some of this workforce planning that we need to get ahead of in 2022. But it is an option for members. It is something that is it will help, but it isn't fundamentally risk critical. So there's a choice for members in agreeing this or not. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Lee. So I'll return to the paper, if I may, and move on to page 13, which talks about how we may be able to balance the budget. So there's been savings identified of 362,000, and that's as a result of impacts of the Safer Together programme, reducing the call on our revenue budgets, and also savings to the authority pensions. So that's specifically the bits that the authority needs to pay for in ill health and injury on duty retirements. So table 4 shows the net budget requirement to be 74.222 million, which can be balanced for the year using the budget smoothing reserve. So the proposal is that if council tax were frozen, there would be a greater call on the budget smoothing reserve. And just a reminder, of course, that the reserves can only be used once. So we know further financial challenges are coming due to COVID and want to protect reserves where possible. So if I can move on to page 14, the chart showing the medium-term financial plan. This shows the base case scenario and that further savings will need to be identified. And these are discussed in more detail in the narrative medium-term financial plan, which is elsewhere on the agenda. So we're outlining at the moment that the potential funding gap is likely to be £7.2 million, increasing to 11.4 million if there are no council tax increases. So that's anticipating there will be further cost pressures and funding pressures in the future. And paragraph 4.6 on page 15 outlines the approach that officers will be taking to identify and deliver further savings over the medium-term financial plan. So that would be looking at how resources are utilised, further digitisation and streamlining of services, and also how we can evidence value for money in delivering of our support services. So I'll move on to section 5, which is the precept consultation. So this year was undertaken via a telephone and online survey, and the full results are in the appendices to these reports. Telephone survey showed that 62% of businesses and 66% of residents agreed it was reasonable for the authority to consider increasing its council tax precept for 21-22. The majority indicated that increases at or above 1.99% would be supported. There is some positive feedback and information on value for money of the service and satisfaction levels. And for the first time, both surveys included some questions on the reputation of the service, and that will be used to inform community engagement going forward, so we can assess our reputation over time. The online survey saw a really great increase in participation, so thank you to the communications and engagement team who worked on that, with over 500% increase in participation from the previous year. In the online survey, 64% of respondents agreed that it would be reasonable, and of those, 2/3 considered that 1.99% or greater would be reasonable. So in the past, we have seen respondents agreeing at around the 65 to 70% mark. Last year, we definitely saw an impact as a result of the Safer Together consultation that went on, with a lower degree of certainty and reasonableness around a council tax precept increase, but that has recovered through the public consultation this year. So if I can move on to the summary budget papers, there is a requirement on me as a Section 112 officer for the authority to report on the robustness of the budget estimates and adequacy of reserves, and these formal reports are included as appendices. This includes highlighting of the additional risks associated with the COVID funding. The budget book is also included in full to be considered by the authority at a later date. So to confirm, the options for discussion, please, would be option A, to freeze council tax at the 2021 level, which is £88.24 for a Band D property, or option B, to consider increasing council tax by 1.99% above 2021 levels. That's an increase of £1.74 a year, or around 15p a month, and that would leave the Band D precept at £90 for the fire authority. If option B is considered, there's a further option around the 12 firefighter development posts at an annual cost of £415,000, and the balancing figure of that would be that we would need to use less of the budget smoothing reserve. So I'll hand over to you all for questions and comments, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Amy, and thank you for your team, as I always say, in the background as well, helping you and assisting you with this and everything. So that's really good. Members, if you'd like to put an X in the chat box or put your hand up electronically, that's fine. If I could just start off, Amy, I was really pleased to hear that the precept consultation has gone ahead and the results that came back. Could I ask, compared to last year, did we have a better response, more people engaging with us? Did we use any social media sites to maybe try and reach new residents to give us their feedback on what they thought? Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, absolutely. So the increase was really quite significant. I think we had over 700 responses to the online consultation in response to an increase from 121 last year. So a real increase in engagement. So the way that was actually done was it was targeted at the demographic. So when the initial survey results came in, you can get some feedback from social media on who's been responding. And then we paid for advertising to ensure that there was a better mix of respondents across different demographics. And that had really, really good results in actually bringing out more balance in age and gender. So the full precept report is in the appendices, and that gives a lot more detail on the breakdown around that.
Lovely, thank you, Amy. That's encouraging to know that we've reached more people and they've given us their feedback, which is really, really good. That's obviously what we want. Right, I have Councillor Wheeler, and then I will go to, after Councillor Wheeler, Councillor Coles. So Councillor Wheeler, over to you.
A couple of points, please, Chair. I think on page 96 there's a small error. The less reserve contribution sort of 655k is shown as red. I think that should be black. And perhaps the more important aspect of my contribution, I do want to support the proposal to fund the 12 firefighter posts, temporary firefighter posts, to overcome the problem that both Amy and Lee indicated of retirements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. May just come back. There is a little bit of a formatting issue, as Councillor Wheeler, being very eagle-eyed, spotted on page 9. There's also the word check that shouldn't be in there. The reason for that is that there's a rounding difference of £1,000. So we will make sure that's corrected when it goes to the full authority next week.
Thank you very much indeed. And Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, all. Amy, once again, thank you very much to you and your team for a fantastic report. It is actually easy to follow, which, when you're an idiot like me, is very, very useful. So thank you for that. The only comments I've got are to support George in his comments earlier, and I would actually recommend that we accept the 1.99% rise and the 415,000. So if I've understood correctly, that is some recommendation A(2), followed by, as a consequence of that, C, and yeah, C(1), I think is the correct. I think that's the correct way round. Is that the correct way around, Amy?
Oh, sorry, yes, it is.
Sorry. Okay, thank you. And I'd like to so propose, Chair, if I may. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cold. Councillor Biedermann.
Thought it would help if we all use the same system for every meeting. Thank you, Amy, and like everybody else says, I won't be repetitive, but this report, I always find your report, sorry, I find quite easy to follow and well set out, and thank you to all your team. I was just going through it. The savings from the Safer Together programme, were there any or not, and where would they be shown? I had a question on the government support for COVID. We had that, obviously you were talking about improving the systems for Teams meetings, etc. Is that not something that we've had help from the government for? And what percentages are current reserve levels, please? And then I've got some follow-on ones regarding budget detail, Chair, but thank you. Happy to let somebody else in first, Mike.
Hey, Amy, would you like to take that?
Thank you. So savings from the Safer Together programme, yes, there have been some. As you know, that there's been changes to the service delivery operating model as a result, and those have been taking place throughout the year. The most recent, which was just before Christmas, was the relocation of Topsham to service headquarters. So, for example, because that building is still being held, we're not in a position to be able to release the savings as yet. So the majority of those savings will be in the capital budget in terms of rationalising our assets, but there will be savings on repairs and maintenance of those vehicles, some fuel, obviously some staffing savings, which were then reinvested into payment for availability. So it's about kind of incremental savings, and those are captured within this budget, but we'll be expecting those to come through in full once all those changes are delivered. So I believe the authority will be receiving an update next week on the progress of those changes. In terms of COVID grant, we have received £1.6 million from the government to support that. That's been directed into, as you say, ICT equipment, for example, for those staff who need to work at home, but predominantly utilised to support the service delivery. So the request in here around Teams expenditure, because that's an ongoing revenue requirement, we'll need it every year to afford the licensing. That's been requested to put into base budget rather than funded from that COVID grant. And apologies, I think you had another question.
Sorry, what's our current level of reserves in percentage terms, please? You know, is it sort of normally a percentage of our reserves against our income or our revenue budget?
Yeah, so the percentage of general reserve is, I think, 6.7%. Excuse me, it is in the appendix. But in terms of overall reserves, they sit at around 50% of the revenue budget expenditure for 1 year. Majority of those are earmarked, particularly for capital.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just before we go on, sorry, I do apologise. Councillor Cole's put on the proposal on the table for the recommendation A(2) followed by C(1). Do I have a seconder for that? If not, I'll second it myself for the record. Okay, thank you for that. Now calling Councillor Pert. I think you're on mute, Councillor Pert. Still on. That's better.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Chair. To Amy, It's page 13, 3.9. Just explain a little bit more about the 12 development firefighters. What does it mean year on year? Does that mean the 12 for how many years?
So it's 12 for a 3-year period. So we're expecting the over establishment would only need to be in for 3 years to ensure that that training and resilience cover is in there. So it's not a total of 36, it would be 12 each year.
Yeah, I was looking at that, and as Lee alluded to, those will be taken from the firefighters themselves, from fire engines recruitment.
Sorry, could you clarify the question? Sorry.
Yeah, I thought Lee said where those were coming from. Are these additional people?
Sorry, yeah, additional people, so new recruits into the service, but Lee will cover a bit more on that.
Yeah, so really, just ask Lee then through you, Chair. The savings on fires themselves, have we got any figures on that to justify this?
So Chair, through to Councillor Peart. Yeah. So in terms of the savings through activity levels are shown in the one of the later papers where it talks about on-call activity, and obviously as activity has come down, our costs for our on-call firefighters, who at the moment most of those will be paid per call when they're required. So as those calls come down, those costs come down. So there are savings through reduced activity, but there's also savings in terms of fuel and wear and tear. So that's reflected in the budget papers. In terms of specifics about the additional posts that Amy's outlined, just to clarify that these would be posts that we would recruit for, in addition to those staff that we have to recruit for anyway for normal operation. And what that does, that then gives us a buffer over to get us through this pressure point that we've got coming up in 2022. So they would be permanent posts, but actually through that natural turnover, we would increase the establishment by 12 for that 3-year period if this was agreed, and then after that 3-year period we would have got through that pressure point. The establishment would then reduce back down to current levels, but that would have given us the additional capacity we need to deal with the pinch point that we've got for both protection and forthcoming retirements. But there would be a new recruitment process that would be an external recruitment process as well, and that would be how we would look to deliver that, subject to members' views, if that helps.
Yeah. So we're saying that's temporary then for that period, just to take the pressures off.
Yeah, that's correct, for the 3-year period.
No, that's really good. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much indeed. And moving on, Councillor Radford, I think you had some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah. 400, I'm not sure, but I understand now it's that's the cost for over a 3-year period. I take it, so that's a third per year on that basis. But I was also going to ask about that, and it was for early retirement or people that retire. Would their savings in their salaries be calculated in that sum as well? So that would be the net cost to the service rather than the 415 being for the additional 12 posts, because there'd obviously be some savings in their salaries, but then obviously there's a pension to pay for it as well and so on, so yeah, I think basically it's been answered, but if anybody got a clearer definition of what I've been trying to say, I'd be pleased to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may come back, Chair, and just to clarify, the 415,000 is each year, so the cost for 3 years would be nearer £1.2 million. The way that the establishment is built up for firefighters is that we need a certain amount of headcount in order to resource to each fire station and each watch. So whilst there would be retirements, we'd only see a very short-term saving potentially on those salaries in the year, because we would look to recruit back up to the same establishment level. So the reason this is emerging as a risk is that there's been a significant change as a result of pensions legislation that was found to be discriminatory, and there is a remedy being put in which will effectively allow firefighters to retire earlier than they might have done under the new scheme. But because they only need 1 month's notice to let us know, then we're concerned that there will be a gap in cover over that period, and we'd probably end up filling that with overtime, which is of course more expensive. So wanting to get ahead of the curve on that and train up some additional resilience in those firefighter posts, we do expect quite considerable numbers of employees retiring in each of those years, because there are people that are already surpassed the pension age based on the remedy which is coming in April 2022. So apologies, it's a little bit convoluted, but no, that's not, so we're not expecting to make savings for those posts. It's additional cover to smooth out any impacts of those retirements over that time period.
Okay, thank you for that. It's 415,000 per year now. Okay,
Yes.
we understand that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Radford. Just before I call Councillor Biedermann back, so I think he had a second question. Amy, can I just talk about efficiencies and digital transformation, and with working from home? Do you have any projections of savings coming from the working from home, or if in the future people may be working from home than commuting into the office? Have you been able to look at that at all yet, or is that something you'll be looking at in the future?
So it's something that we're developing plans around at the moment in terms of smarter working. Obviously, we have seen significant savings in this financial year as a result of staff working from home, reduction in travel budgets, for example. But in terms of developing a longer term policy and strategy around that, that's something that's being worked up alongside our staff at the moment to be consistent. So expecting significant savings to come forward. The other opportunity is around our estates footprint as well, and I'll move on to that in the capital strategy.
Lovely, thank you, Amy. And Councillor Biedermann, sorry, you had another question.
It's probably a series is a better description. Sorry, Chair. Sorry, Amy. I'm on page 94, Amy, and the actual bit more the detail of the budget. The standout one is line number 11. Travel and subsistence. That's showing an increase of £499,000. I find that quite surprising that given that we're all working from home and I'm assuming that going forward there will be an awful lot more of Teams meetings and the need to travel to service headquarters, etc., both for members and staff. So I just could you deal with that one on its own for me, please?
Yes, absolutely. And I do feel like I need to add a note to this actually to explain the variance. So the reason that has increased is because there's been a change to the accounting regulations around leases. So what that is effectively doing is putting the capital cost of leases under IFRS 16 onto the revenue budget. So it's actually just a change in budget line rather than an increase.
So has this come from line 20? Is this come from line 23?
Yes.
So in effect, it's a saving of £200,000.
Yes. But definitely need to highlight that in narrative.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. So, Chair, I don't know which one to pick on next. Well, line 2, really, the professional and technical support staff, an increase of 150,000 seems quite high compared to service delivery staff of 50,000. What extra are we putting into our professional?
So that's covered in the unavoidable commitments line in the detail of the budget. So support staff, the grading structure that they have under the Green Book is that they are entitled to increments. So that's an unavoidable commitment in order to fund those increments each year. So it's not representing additional headcount. Whereas obviously there is no planned actual cost of living pay rise for either of the staff groups in that.
So say that again then, sorry, Chip. So why do we need to increase it if we're not employing extra?
Because people are entitled to annual increments under their contract.
Oh, right, okay. Thank you. Sorry. And not being too biased towards extras, how have we managed to save quite so much on the fire service pensions?
So this is a complexity of the way that the regulations work. Effectively, the costs to the authority in this amount are a combination of one-off costs when people retire, so their commutation, and the ongoing annual pension. So it's a matter of timing. The reason why this is included in the authority's revenue budget and not against the pension fund is it's deemed to be controllable costs. So it's ill health, retirements and injuries on duty, which we'd obviously look to reduce wherever possible. So the good news is that we have fewer projected ill health and injury on duty retirements with those significant costs that come with that type of pension.
Thank you. I'm still going, Chair, if you don't mind, and tell me to if you do.
No, I've just asked if there's anyone else. There isn't, so continue, please.
Yeah, the protective clothing showing a reduction in £90,000. So sort of, is there not an annual sort of need for that, or is there just a particular reason that next year there'll be a need for less protective?
No, it's actually as a change to the way that we allocate and launder PPE. So there was a project to improve the efficiency of that, which included a better quality control over the cleaning requirements and when elements of PPE could actually be repaired and returned into the pool stock. So that's brought some of that assessment in-house, working with our supplier to ensure that there are fewer items of clothing which end up going to waste. So it's a better management of that process. So a good result.
That's good. Thank you. I was just worried. I didn't want to think that we were, you know, you read these budget lines and you're worrying that we're cutting, you know, I'd hate to see us penny pinching on protective equipment in any way. So that you've totally reassured me there. That's good. External fees and services, that's a huge rise. Percentage rise of 41,000. Is it 41,000 from 103 external fees and charges?
Absolutely. Apologies. Obviously, the way I've presented the budget in terms of savings in the papers above is slightly different to how it's presented here, and I'm happy to work on making that clearer for the next year. So the majority of these are reflecting improvement work that's going on. So, for example, getting some external HR support to improve the people pillar along with HMI, and that also covers alongside with the budget below, actually things like our occupational health provision for staff.
But do we really need that much extra? It just seems that, you know, it's almost a 50% increase on the previous budget. But
I'm happy to come back with a bit more detail on that later if it would be helpful.
if you wouldn't mind, that would be good. Catering, that would get the public going, wouldn't it? I would have thought. I just noticed that we're adding 10,000 to catering. I don't quite understand that one, again, by the fact that we're all working from home more and not providing sandwiches and things. So sort of interested in that line.
Thank you. Obviously, we'd usually report on budget variances above 50,000, but I'm happy to provide more narrative if needs be.
And then finally, and I'm sorry, Amy and members, but I do think this is important on these individual lines, especially if the public would pick them. They'd be exactly the same as me, I suspect, asking these sort of questions. But printing and stationery and office expenses, obviously, I'm hoping that we do an awful lot less printing these days and stationery and things, and again, showing quite a rise there.
Thank you. I understand that the proposed increase in that line is actually around paying for external consultation, but I appreciate that doesn't quite fit with the description. So again, I'll need to come back on the detail.
So we paid for consultation this year, is clearly quite successful. I mean, when you say consultation, I assume do you mean around the budget or just in general of all of it?
Ongoing consultation on different elements. The budget is something that we have to do every year, and that costs around £13,000.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry, members. That was. Thank you, Amy.
That's okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Radford, I think you've got another question to ask.
No. Basically, just a comment. A lot of questions about increasing costs now, but it's worth noting on line 23 there's a saving of nearly £700, so £700,000. So it's worth noting that. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I just check if there's any other member of the committee would like to ask any final questions? I'm not seeing any hands go up or any indications. Okay, out of the two recommendations, Councillor Coles has put forward and proposed point B2, and I've seconded it. So can I just check with Democratic that I need to read out both or just the one that's been proposed?
Chairman, I wouldn't say that you need to read out everything, but the implication is that Councillor Coles has proposed moving option B as set out in the paper, which is paragraph A2, paragraph B, and also paragraph C2 in recommendations as printed in the paper. And that has been seconded by yourself.
Okay, that's fine. So in that case, I think we'll go to the vote.
Chair, sorry, can I want to test, I'm going to be a lone voice here, but I'm going to test it. Okay, I'd like to move an amendment that we look to give a council tax holiday this year actually, and keep it at 0%, simply because of the I realise I do realise the difficulty this puts the authority under, given the government, the funding problems that we've had over the years. But I just think in the community times are really, really hard, and I think actually we as an authority could stomach a council tax freeze this year to help the community and not affect service delivery in any way. And I think there's extra savings that could be made and we could be squeezed. So I would actually like to propose option A. Thank you.
Okay, we have an amendment put forward by Councillor Biederman. Is there a seconder for his amendment?
Chairman.
Yes, sir. So go ahead.
So I just think you need to ask Mike Pearson as to whether that's a valid amendment, because in my eyes it's a direct negative, and therefore all he has to do is vote against. A clarification from Mike Pearson would be very helpful.
Okay, yep, I take that on board. Mr. Pearson, can you give some advice on this, please?
Yes, happy to do that. The other options printed in the paper. So valid amendment. It's one of the it's the option A, which is not doing council tax. Sorry, you're not hearing me very clearly.
Not you're breaking up a little bit. Some of it's okay, but I think we're getting the gist of it. Try again.
If I turn my video off, is that any better?
That's much better, thank you.
Okay, Somerset broadband issues, I think, coming to play here. My view is it's not a direct negative because it is one of the other options printed in the paper. So it's a different option rather than just the opposite of it. So I think it is a valid amendment, and you can seek whether there is a seconder for it.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Pearson, for your advice there. So is there a seconder for the amendment put forward by Councillor Biederman to not have an increase on the precept this year? I'm not getting any indication, so I don't think you've got a seconder, Councillor Biederman.
No.
I didn't expect one. Thank you, Chair.
All right, okay, thank you. So if we could then go to the vote, please. As has been said, we've got the proposal for along with part B and C, the first point. Could I please ask all those that are in favour to indicate visually?
Chair, just a point of order. Do we not have to take a roll call vote on this?
I
No,
did
Chair.
ask that. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. No, Chair. I did confirm that we don't have to take a roll call vote on this at committee.
But we're quite happy to I was going to do the fors and then the against afterwards, or the abstains. So you can be recorded whichever way you wish to vote. So can we just do that one more time for democratic support? All those in favour?
That's 6-4, Chairman.
And could I say ask for those against, or
That's me, and can that be recorded? Thank you.
as against?
Yes, please.
Lovely. Okay,
Thank
that's
you,
been
Chair.
recorded.
So noted, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you, members.
Just to
Moving on
confirm that is carried, Chairman, just to be absolutely clear, that is carried on the basis of option B. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. Moving on to item agenda number 5, the capital strategy from pages 99 to 108. Amy, are you taking us through this one again?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chair. So I've got the printed page 99 for the capital strategy. So just to confirm that this is an annual public facing document, so it's an update rather than any material changes being made. It outlines the way in which the capital funding requirement is built up and the risks associated with the programme and the funding inherent in that. So this is the third iteration of this report, which goes onto our public facing website. So the narrative has been amended slightly to reflect changes and decisions made as part of the Safer Together programme. And the paper goes on to highlight the need for the continued revenue funding to maintain the affordability of the capital programme, and confirms that the strategy of this authority is to use its reserves and revenue funding to avoid borrowing in the future. So just to highlight, there's been no borrowing since 2012 and nothing forecast until the 2024-25 period. So the committee is asked to recommend the strategy onto the authority for approval and publication.
Thank you very much, Amy. Do any members of the committee have any questions?
To be a bit more positive, Chairman, I would like to propose and move that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Biederman. Sorry, Councillor Pert, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's really about the changing of the fire engines. I've mentioned this before. How many miles a year does each engine do, fire appliance?
That's a question I'm going to have to come back on you, Councillor Pett.
Because I'm concerned that we're looking at changing 49. I know it's spaced out, but it's a considerable cost.
Absolutely. The next item on the agenda of the capital programme goes into a bit more detail about the reasons behind that change. I think Lee wanted to come in about renewing those assets as well.
Okay, I'll wait till we get to that.
It's okay, we can discuss it now.
Thank you for that. Do I have a seconder for Councillor Biederman proposing that? Is that Councillor Coles seconding, or do you have a question? Sorry, I think you're on mute.
Thank you, Chair. Seconding, thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Could we all please indicate if we're accepting the recommendation, please?
Chair.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. You did, apologies, you did put an X in there. Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Wheeler, I beg your pardon.
Thanks, Chair. It's on a similar point to Councillor Pearce, and it'll probably come out better in the next item. But I did just want to flag up that I'm not quite clear how we evaluate the consequences of the appliance of the fire engine change program, the fire engine replacement program. There are obvious advantages in having newer engines, but it's a significant cost, and it's a significant environmental cost as well. The carbon footprint of a new fire engine, of the manufacture of a new fire engine, must be quite significant. So I just wanted to flag up that I'd like to know how we evaluate the pros and cons of the vehicle replacement program, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Would you like to cover that now, or when we discuss the medium rescue pumps?
When it's best.
I think when at the appropriate time, I think would be best. But we note the question you've asked, Councillor Wheeler, and by all means come back again and, on the next agenda.
Thank you.
So could I ask again? Could I ask for the support of the recommendation, please, from all members, but to show visually? Councillor Biederman, sorry, your camera's off. Oh, there it is, thanks.
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. I think Sam was on mute there. Okay, thanks very much.
Is that North Devon sun coming in through the window? Sorry.
Sorry, apologies. I was on mute. Was unanimous.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Moving on to item agenda number 6 now, the capital programme 2021 to 2022 to 23 to 24 on pages 109 to 120 of our pack.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper is the capital programme, covers the indicative programme for the 3-year period, requests approval for the high-level capital programme in 21-22 and the associated prudential indicators. So the programme is adjusted for timing differences at the end of each year and now includes the decisions made as part of the Safer Together programme. So that has allowed some asset rationalisation and modernisation plans to come through. The overarching test for affordability of our capital programme is that the total cost of capital doesn't exceed 5% of our revenue budget. And the forecast is that that will still be contained over the entire period of this paper. However, it's worth noting that if funding significantly decreases, that does have the impact of decreasing our revenue budget and therefore could artificially push up this percentage. So the two are linked to each other, and we've seen that come through in terms of the impact of COVID funding for this year. The authority is committed to its strategy to reduce borrowing where possible. However, those reserves that have been built up for capital can only be used once, and so it's important to maintain that revenue contribution to capital wherever possible. However, as shown in the chart on page 112, we're still expecting a shortfall in 24-25 onwards and the need to borrow again. Page 113 shows the movement since the budget was last presented to the authority. And page 14 onwards discusses the individual elements of the capital programme. So just to highlight that the estate strategy is currently being refreshed to align to those organisational priorities after the Safer Together programme, and also to consider opportunities to rationalise or reduce the footprint in light of COVID and the authority's environmental strategy. So it focuses on some improvement works and two major projects, which is Plymstock and Camel's Head fire stations. So members are already aware, as there's been alluded to, of the significant programme to modernise the fleet, and this focuses on introduction of medium rescue pumps, or MRPs, and the replacement programme. They're called MRPs and medium, they are actually the biggest fire engines that we have in our fleet, and some of these are now of considerable age. So more information is included on the age profile of the fleet and the reasons for changing them at this time on page 114 and 115. So the need to renew those assets is for a variety of reasons, and a full business case has been developed for the fleet strategy over a 10-year period, although the detail of that is developed by officers. So that considers efficiency and economy, the benefits of standardisation and how we train our staff so that if they move to different stations, for example, they're more likely to come across the same vehicle, and that reduces the risk to them. Standardisation in the way that we service and maintain our vehicles. Some of the vehicles are now at the age where it's very, very difficult to get replacement parts for them, and they actually have to be manufactured specially. So this is putting a lot of pressure and effort into the fleet maintenance teams in trying to source those parts. And again, it's due to the age rather than necessarily the mileage of those vehicles. Also taking into account environmental aspects, some of the appliances are actually on a Euro 3 or a Euro 4 chassis, and the latest ones would be on the Euro 6 standard or higher. So expecting significant benefits in terms of emissions output from those vehicles. However, in terms of assessing the environmental impact of the build, that hasn't been built into the plan so far. But now that we have the Green DSFRS environmental strategy, which is approved before Christmas, we will be able to make sure that we're clearly defining that kind of impact in our decision making. So hopefully that answers the question there. Did anyone want to come in with questions specifically around the MRP replacement programme at this stage?
Could I just ask a quick question on that, actually? I think you've answered it anyway, Amy. I was just more concerned about the supply chain of the new vehicles coming through, given the national problems we've had. And forgive me, I don't know if there's any parts coming from Europe or anything, or it's all domestic. But I just wondered, supply chain, is that okay? There's no indications of any problems there?
So there have been some impacts, which has caused some timing differences between the 2021 financial year. So we were hoping for full delivery of the first 15 by March. That's now expected in the spring of 21, so in the coming months. Those chassis have been delivered, and they are actually in a workshop in Scotland, and that's where we actually have our own dedicated production line for these vehicles within Emergency One, who are the supplier. So the procurement team have been doing a really, really good job of ensuring that that build stays on track. There is some vulnerability, because obviously within that business there's a team of experienced bodybuilders. I think they're called bodybuilders. That sounds like the wrong term. Coach builders. And if they are particularly impacted as a team by COVID, for example, if there's an outbreak, then obviously there's potential. However, we have assurance from the supplier that they have COVID safe working in place and the controls in order to avoid that where possible.
Thank you, Amy. Yes, I think there was a couple of other questions. Councillor Wheeler, is this the area you were like to ask a question on?
Sorry, Chair, I switched off my video instead of switching on my mic.
Don't worry.
Yes, it was really, and I just wonder if it would be helpful to have a report perhaps to the Audit and Performance Review Committee on the cost-benefit analysis that is carried out. I don't want to ask for sort of ad hoc assessment now, but I take all the points that Amy's made and they're made in the report as well. But I think seeing some quantification of the assessment would be helpful for members. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. I've got Councillor Biederman and then followed by Councillor Pert so far. And go ahead, Councillor Biederman.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Amy, I'm sort of on page 114, 3.4, station closures, etc. I mean, sort of getting a bit territorial here, really. The station at Barnstable for a long time sort of seems to have been talked about it being in the wrong location, needing upgrade, and you know we certainly have problems, I believe, around recruitment of on-call firefighters, given that you know much of the house building is taking place sort of on the other side of the town, and very few people apply simply because they're not close enough to the fire, don't work or are close enough to the fire station, because many of the jobs have been taken out of the town centre as well. Is there any specific projects in there under that are being looked at? Thank you.
Thank you. Lee might want to come in here on some of the detail around how we're building up the next community risk management plan, which would determine the location of those stations based on risk. Particularly on your points around on-call recruitment and retention, the payment for availability system has obviously been put in order to better incentivise staff and ensure those appliances are available at all times. I'm not actually sure whether Barnstable have adopted that as yet, but I can try and check whilst Lee's talking, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, like I say, I just understand that that's a particular problem, the amount of people actually work in the town. So, I mean, the other point I was trying to make, and I should have made, was that, because I know we've got a problem with our police station as well, in that they've had to move out and they've gone into a temporary building, and they will be looking at sites to move as well, and whether we should be talking to each other on that. There might be some sort of joined up thinking going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure Lee will come back on the work that we're doing with estates as well.
Yes,
yeah, through you, Chair. If it helps, just to reassure Councillor Biederman, we are in discussion with the police. In fact, I chair a collaboration board with Devon and Cornwall Police, where the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner is also represented. So we very much are having discussions and looking to see where we can do things differently together, not just with police, but with other local authority partners and other partners generally. So that is work in hand. As Amy's outlined, the next iteration of the community risk management plan is being designed. We're duty bound to review risk on a regular basis, as members know. So we're looking at where the risk is, and therefore where we'll be best placed to support that risk. I think it's worth saying, in terms of the condition of our assets, members will know that our fire stations are quite dated, and you'll know through visits on fire stations just how dated some of our fire engines are, and those figures that Amy's outlined are key in the paper. And whilst we can't do everything, you know, what we are doing is commissioning a review, an asset review condition survey that will inform the extent of refurbishment or rebuild as well. So there are two aspects to the capital programme in terms of estate. One is the location, and the other is whether or not it's a station's in the right place, and then there's a refurbishment or a rebuild requirement. I think specifically in terms of North Devon, as Councillor Beaton knows better than anybody, you know, Barnstable is the only whole-time fire station we've got in the north of the county. Most of our areas of risk are in the town centre, so that is generally where we need to be located. And whilst we might have other ideas in terms of where a station would ideally be set, we've got to balance that with, if we relocate a fire station, can we get the crew, certainly our on-call crew, to still be able to respond from that location, or do we need to recruit a new on-call complement if we've moved that station? And then it's balancing the cost of rebuild versus refurbishment. So those are all in the mix, and the survey review will be undertaken this year. And in addition, the community risk awareness assessment will be undertaken, which might inform what we need moving forward. So hopefully that helps, Jim.
Thank you, Lee. It does actually, and I'm just pleased that it's on your radar and you're talking to the police, because I was thinking if there is something that we're going to be doing, it would be sensible and that, as you say, local authorities. But I think there are some opportunities there personally, but I just wanted it flagged and just spotted this opportunity. So thank you, Chair. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you very much, Councillor Biederman. Councillor Pert, and then followed by Councillor Yapsley. So Councillor Pert.
Thank you, Chair. My question is still back on the cost of fire engines. Does the cost of each engine, does that include the equipment that's on it? And if not, what's the breakdown between the cost of the equipment and the cost of the fire engine? That's my first question, Amy.
Thank you, Chair. I'll come back on that one. No, it doesn't include the cost of the equipment. Usually what happens is that the items are deemed below the capital level, so they're actually in the revenue budget. A replacement cycle for the equipment which doesn't necessarily align to the asset life of the vehicle. So it may need to be replaced more frequently or depending on frequency of use. So what will happen is an equipment cascade program will be developed, or already has been with the fleet, which is to take the best, newer, reusable kit and equipment off the old fire engine on to the newer ones. As a general rule of thumb, and a medium rescue pump and all the standard equipment that comes with that can cost up to £50,000 additional revenue budget on top of the £280,000 to £290,000 cost of individual appliances. So a significant investment.
Yes, thank you there, Amy. And just as a second question, a supplementary, what happens to the fire engines when you get rid of them? And even the equipment?
So our appliances and equipment are disposed of via our disposals policy. So there's a variety of routes to market. So that can be or through a decommissioning process to make sure that they are not used inadvertently in the wrong way, which some headlines from another fire and rescue services were made out a couple of years ago. So we usually use government approved auction houses if the assets are of significant value, but otherwise they can be scrapped or recycled.
Do we have any figures on what kind of revenue we get back from them, Amy?
Yes, because I sign them off generally. They're usually a couple of £1,000s for the engine itself. So when they're end of life at 21, 22 years old, that's the age we've been disposing them of them. They can be up to 6,000 or 7,000 on a good day.
Yeah, I mean, just as another question, earlier on in the table, am I right? Is it about 700,000 maintenance cost or slightly under that, was it?
The total cost of fleet provision is into the millions of pounds in terms of maintenance but I think it's the way that it's broken down in that table. So let me just check that and come back to you.
Yeah, because that would make a big difference to knowing that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pert. Councillor Yapsley, I believe you've got a question.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of points really. Firstly, just to finish off with Councillor Wheeler's very pertinent and interesting questioning, and others are concerned about the replacement programme. The issue that comes to my mind is the disruption caused. And I'm thinking here waste and recycling really, which is not as urgent as our own activities, but vehicles that break down when on call surely must be extremely difficult to deal with. And I think we need to bring that into the mix, as well as the upgrading of equipment and ability of a particular fire engine. So thank you for that. Look forward to hearing more about that later. And can I say it's really good to hear the Chief's answers to Councillor Biederman reference Barnstaple Station, huge amount of development coming forward, of course, as we know. But also don't forget South Molton, a large amount of development on the western side. Although the fire station is quite well placed, I would suggest. But Witheridge, we have a new fire station in Witheridge on call. Just finished 65 houses, and I've seen a pre-app coming forward for another 130 or 40 straight on. So, and with another 27 acres just joining the slough, which would goodness knows how many more houses that will be. So things are moving forward, and just to bring that to services mind, some communities are increasing in number quite significantly. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I think Amy would just like to come back before I call Councillor Radford.
Thank you. Just a clarity to confirm those figures, as you say, £708,000 for repair and maintenance directly, running costs and insurance, £1.257 million. We do also have a lot of cost through the line number 12, equipment and furniture. So that's where all of the operational equipment, such as the cutting gear that's on those appliances, would feature in that line, which is a total budget quite considerable, £3.567 million. So just to confirm.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that a supplementary, Councillor Pert?
Yes, thank you for that, Amy. I thought I was round about the figure there. The other question I think was on mileage. I know you haven't got that figure yet. What kind of mileage on average a fire engine does a year? Because they're not travelling great distances, I would have thought. It just seems like the wear and tear, it's like any vehicle, you know. What usually wears out on a fire engine? Is it usually the engine or just general maintenance, like any vehicle?
Thank you. It is general maintenance. Whilst the vehicles are considerably lower mileage, we do, for the type of chassis, extend the vehicle life quite considerably. So obviously there's quite a lot of load on those vehicles because they're pumping appliances. So when they're actually at an incident, although they might not do the miles, the pump, etc., is working a lot at those incidents. So what it's usually based around is age and condition of the appliance rather than the specific mileage that it's done. So an HGV that's out on the road might usually have a useful life of maybe 4 or 5 years in comparison to the standard life of around 15. So hopefully that gives you an indication of mileage. So it wouldn't necessarily be mileage that would cause the need to replace. It would be the condition and otherwise of that vehicle. That's helpful.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you, Amy.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Pert. Councillor Radford, if you'd like to ask a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I mean, my questions, I think Councillor Peters asked it in actual fact. My question was similar to what he asked about the disposal of vehicle. Is it based on a year? Because I see on the 3.7 you've got a 10-year vehicle replacement program. So it seems to me that at the end of a 10-year period, that's it, the vehicle goes. But vehicles, commercial vehicles these days travel huge mileages, and I wouldn't have thought a fire engine does travel huge mileages. So whether disposal should be considered on a yearly basis or on the amount of miles that the vehicle travels. But if the vehicle costs about 50,000 to buy, I think that's what Amy said, around about 50,000 to buy, I take it that's just a chassis, and you sell it for between 2,000 and 5,000 on a good day. That's a huge cost per depreciation on the vehicle over a 10-year period. Just wondered whether they could actually run a little bit longer than the 10-year period, or I believe it should be worked out more on a mileage per year that the vehicle runs rather than a 10-year period. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Amy, I was just wondering, we're getting into some quite detailed questions here. Is it going to be easier to do a paper to present it at one of the forums, do you think, so we could research this in depth? Do you think that would help you and the Chief put something together for the members?
Absolutely. I was going to suggest that it might be helpful for members to understand how that profile is built up, and just to confirm that it's not an arbitrary process, it's around the condition. But of course, for planning purposes and how we fund, we have to make an estimate of when those assets are going to come to the end of their life. And we already know that the fleet, the profile that we have at the moment, is considerably overdue for replacement, and we're experiencing that due to the servicing and maintenance burden. And as I said earlier, the need to actually have manufactured parts specifically for those vehicles. So the case for change at the moment is really strong. Obviously, we're happy to bring further information back to members about how those decisions are made.
Yep, that'd be very good. I just wanted to ask one very quick question. Actually, it was on page 114, 3.2, reference the estates, but I think you've covered it. I was going to ask, do we have sort of like a register of condition of buildings? But I think you said you're working on that at the moment and there's more information to come back. So I won't ask you that question. I think you've covered it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So basically, if I can bring members back to the recommendations on page 109 there, I'd like to propose the recommendations there. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Pert, thank you very much for seconding. And can I ask all members if you'd like to indicate visually, please, if you support the recommendations?
Two, three, 4, 5. That's carried unanimously, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. That's great. So moving on to item agenda number 7, the medium-term financial plan on pages 121 to 132. And Amy, I guess it's yourself again.
Thank you. Members might be pleased to hear this is the last paper that I'm taking today. So this is the medium-term financial plan. Again, it's an annual public-facing document. So this is an update rather than any material changes to the document. And we're requesting support, please, and recommendations through to the authority as they're responsible for approving the medium-term financial plan. So the document is narrative. It will be published on our website, and it outlines the way in which the plan is built up and the assumptions which underlie the medium-term financial plan around cost and funding scenarios. It presents a range of scenarios, and that is presented in our best, worst, and base case. So the update this time has amended the narrative for the Safe Together and gives more detail on how further savings challenges will be met, and obviously proposals will come forward once officers have developed those plans to the authority. On page 27 shows the potential funding gap of £12.8 million if council tax is frozen, and shows the wide range of those scenarios on that chart. So just to confirm that officers will be working up in response to that budget gap. We've already mentioned the development of the revised estate strategy and look to rationalise and reduce the footprint of some of our support buildings. Focus on smarter working and continued digital transformation, and reviewing whether any supporting functions are achieving value for money and exploring alternative delivery models for those support functions. Delivery of the green DSFRS environmental strategy, so obviously that's looking to reduce wherever possible. And finally, exploring opportunities to improve the productivity of staff and assets. So again, this is an annual document that's been updated to reflect the current period and the risks surrounding COVID. So I'm looking for the committee to consider and approve through to the authority, please.
Thank you very much, Amy. Members, does anyone have any questions on item agenda number 7? I'm not seeing anyone. Sorry, Councillor Wheeler, go ahead with your question.
Well, it wasn't really a question, Chair. I think this time the medium-term financial plan is even more uncertain than it usually is. Any sort of forecasting carries uncertainties, but we really are in, I think, uncharted, or we are about to enter uncharted water now, and I think this report really does make the best of a difficult situation. I'm happy to move it if that would help in due course. But there are so many unknowns, and the scale of the unknowns is far greater than usual. So I think Amy and her team have had a difficult job in formulating it. And I think they and we are going to have an even more difficult job in implementing it in the next few years. But I think it does show where we're going, or the direction and the problems we're going to face. And I think it's well worth having all that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wheeler. And Councillor Biedermann, sorry, did you wish to come in with a question?
More of a ranty comment, really. Thank you, Chair. And again, thank you to Amy. I mean, how can they possibly do their job with, you know, these continued one-year government settlements, which makes it virtually impossible, isn't it, to plan forward and know exactly where we're going and how we're going to do things into the future. So, you know, I just think we probably need to join the growing army of local authorities, you know, calling for sort of 3-4 years government settlements to enable us all to be able to plan properly and into the future and ultimately get better value if we can do that. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy to, I'm not sure if I really second the recommendation or not, but happy to if not. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Biedermann. Thank you for your comments. Yes, Councillor Yabsley's just beaten you to it, actually, to second that. So that's proposed by Councillor Wheeler, seconded by Councillor Yabsley. I'm not getting any indications anyone else is willing to, or got a question to ask, I should say. So if everyone is willing to visually vote on accepting the recommendation, the Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Authority be recommended to endorse the medium-term financial plan as appended to the report. All those in favour visually, please.
2, 3, 4, 5. Frank, put your camera on. That's carried unanimously, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Sam, I thought mine eyes, but I'm certainly for.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, moving on now to item agenda number 8, the Treasury Management Strategy, pages 133 to 168. And I think, Amy, you said you're not doing this one. Who's leading us through this one?
Thank you. I will just introduce it. Thank
you. Will.
You,
okay,
Chair.
fine. Thank you.
So welcome to Adam Burleton from Link Asset Services, who supports our Treasury Management Strategy. So just a reminder, the Treasury Management Strategy Statement is the final document in the suite of documents you've been considering as part of the budget setting for the coming year, 21-22. So it's an annual document which is being refreshed with the current figures to determine the key performance indicators and those prudential indicators which we will then monitor against through the Resources Committee in the coming year. It determines the authority's approach of security, liquidity and yield, outlines the investment strategy and the minimum revenue provision. So that's a different MRP acronym to the one we've just been looking at in the capital programme. So these are what we need to publish under the SIPFA code. There is a small amendment this year to consider including subsidiaries of the authority as an approved counterparty, but that would be subject to any formal approach for funding or loans coming from those subsidiaries. I will hand over to Adam as he will talk through briefly how the TMSS is built up. And also just to confirm that the narrative from Link has been moved just to an appendix to make what you're approving a little bit clearer this year.
Thank you very much, Amy. And Adam, welcome to the committee. Nice to see you. I hope you're keeping well. And over to you.
I am, Chair. I think I'm just going through the Treasury Management Performance Report, aren't I, Amy?
Yeah, sorry, apologies, Adam. I didn't know if you had any comments on the TMSS.
No comments on that one.
Okay.
In terms of just a subtle change that might be coming through, just update. I heard you talking about obviously environmental and carbon sort of issues. The sit for our Treasury Management Code, which require all authorities to consider environmental, social and governance issues as part of their investment strategy. It's not implemented yet, but it will require some changes to the policies going forward from 2022. So we will be keeping you updated on it, but it's just to inform members that that will also support your move towards carbon sort of neutral footprints as well. Okay.
Thank you, that's great.
At the moment, just to sort of reiterate, the requirements of the investment guidance issued by the Secretary of State still requires security, liquidity first, and then a yield from any investment you make. So that's the priority, and that's what's covered in this document. So to move through the document, it is the Treasury Management performance for quarters 2 and 3 because of the reporting cycle. You've got 2 periods covered in one report here. The recommendations are for the information in this report to be noted by members.
Chairman.
It is a requirement of the Sorry.
Chairman, sorry, we haven't actually quite got to that point. We haven't taken a decision on the Treasury management yet. Apologies, Adam, to cut you off mid-flow. Chairman, could we move back to item 8, please?
Yep, certainly. Item 8.
Okay.
I think if Chairman, if you could move to the recommendation, it didn't seem there were anybody else, but
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Yes, I beg your pardon. Sorry, I was one set ahead there. I do beg your pardon.
Councillor Wheeler has his hand up.
Yeah, of course. Councillor Wheeler, would you like to?
Yeah, it's not really a question about the strategy itself. It's just something arising from table 3.3 on page 143. Public. I just wanted to ask when most of the £25 million we borrowed from the PWLB becomes due. We're paying rather a higher interest rate for that, and I wondered when we're going to be able to pay it off and substitute something more like current interest rates for that, please.
Thank you. So the maturity of that loan profile is over quite considerable period of time. I think it's about 38 years at the moment that the last one is due to be paid off. We do reconsider working with Adam our profile of loans and when there are opportunities to repay anything early. However, the premium that is attached to that at the moment wouldn't make it economically viable in order to do that. So the saving that we'd make on the interest rate at the moment wouldn't offset the premium for repayment.
Thanks, Chair. I just wondered when we were going to get rid of it, but yeah, spread over 38 years. Okay, thank you.
It's a long-term strategy.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Does anyone else have any questions on item agenda number 8? Sorry, I thought we were still on it. It's my fault. If not, could we just go to the recommendation, please? If everyone is in agreement with the recommendation for item agenda number 8, could we please show visually?
Chairman, could you need a proposer and a seconder first, please?
Happy to propose or second, Jonathan.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. And I'll second then. So again, sorry, all those in favour, please, of the report, item 8, visually.
That's carried unanimously. Oh, Jeremy, could you just, yeah, that's it. Carried unanimously, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, sorry. And Amy, I don't know what's happened. Sorry. I thought we were going to 9, but we're on 10. Is that right?
No.
No.
Chair, we're going to 9 now.
We're going to 9 now. Right, okay.
Sorry, this is actually my fault for confusing matters and inviting Adam because I thought the Treasury management papers were next to each other on the agenda. So
that's what I had on my piece of paper.
If we may, Chair, could we move on to item 10 first so that Adam can speak to his report and then take item 9
so everybody, this is item agenda number 10, which is starting on page 183 to 198. And over to you, Adam.
Okay,
Chair,
thank you, Chair. So, sorry.
Sorry, the agenda I've got, Chair, is that item 9 is the Treasury Management Performance Report, which I think is what Adam is going to be talking about. Item 10 is the budget report. So unless I've got it wrong, Amy, I think Adam is talking about item 9, the Treasury Management Performance Report, quarters 2 to 3, starting on page 169.
That's what I had on mine, but I've been indicated in the chat comment it's not correct. So sorry, could we just have some clarification?
Item 9 is the Treasury Management Performance Report for quarters 2 and 3.
And Adam is presenting that.
Yes.
Okay, fine.
I think so.
Apologies,
right, okay.
that is my confusion.
Right,
Thank
okay,
you.
not a problem. Okay, everybody. So just to reconfirm one last time, it's item agenda number 9 from pages 169 to 182, and apologies about the confusion. And Adam, welcome again. Please carry on.
Thank you, Chair. Right, in terms of what the report is covering, as you indicated, Treasury Management Performance 2021, quarters 2 and 3, which takes you up to the end of December 2020. The recommendation is to be noted. It's a requirement of the SITFA Codes of Practice to bring at least 2 reports to members. You exceed that requirement by bringing quarterly reports, and you obviously will get an outturn report after the end of the financial year. In terms of what's in the report, there's a lot of detail in here around what's been happening in the economy, and I'm sure you're all aware with COVID 2020 and into 2021 is a completely different year than we were anticipating, and the government and central bank have acted accordingly as to try and support the economy during that pandemic. So in terms of the introduction, there's a requirement obviously to set out specific issues within the reporting framework within SITFA, and that's covered with introduction. We cover this every time, so I won't go through that a lot in detail. In terms of section 2, in terms of the economic background, I suppose there's a lot of information here. It's just critical to emphasise the key points. The economic output of the UK economy has shrunk by about, they say about 10%. Figures fluctuate because of moving restrictions around the UK economy and lockdown. But we did have a sort of big reduction of economic output in quarter 1. That recovered as we unlocked during the summer and obviously and through towards Christmas. But we have gone into a further lockdown, and that's moving us back into a lower output position. So the expectation from the Bank of England is that it will take until quarter 1 2022 to recover what we lost during the period of the COVID crisis. That will put a lot of spare capacity into the economy, and that excess demand is not expected to recover until quarter 4 2022. So the expectation is inflation, which is what they obviously target, will stay below their 2% target throughout that period and probably into 2023. And what they're really saying is that bank rate, which has been cut to 0.1 from 0.75 as we entered the crisis, will remain at that level throughout their sort of forecast period. In our forecast period, we're saying March 2024, we don't see a bank rate change. And even if they see inflation move above their target, and this is a critical point, they won't seek to change monetary policy until they really clear that it will become embedded and be an issue that they have to address. You may have also picked up that there's a risk that we might get negative interest rates. That would impact further the sort of downward pressure on your investment returns. We haven't had that in our central forecast, and it looks like it's been pushed back a bit further by comments from the Bank of England recently to say that they're not looking to use it within the next 6 to 12 months. So whilst there's a lot of information in this report, I think that's sort of the key bits I would probably like to emphasise. Inflation. One thing in terms of the UK that's slightly different to some other economies is that the level of unemployment has been kept much lower than it would otherwise have been if we hadn't had the furlough scheme, which has supported a lot of employees to remain in work whilst not working. And there is a risk that as that unwinds, as we come out of this crisis, we might see unemployment move up, and there's a risk that we might see it move up as high as 7% in the UK. So there's some sort of pressures that will come through. One thing the Bank of England have also done is something called quantitative easing, and that's sort of producing money to buy back bonds from the banks and give them plenty of liquidity. And that now stands at 895 billion. And I suppose the scale of what the government has been doing has also pushed national debt up, and that now stands at 2 trillion. So it's about 100% of GDP. and there is a risk at some point that we might have our own sovereign rating downgraded, and that might impact some of the investment opportunities out there. But at the moment, the credit market's been very stable. You aren't heavily exposed to interest rates, to credit issues, because you use a small number of counterparties, but we do keep you updated on that. And I suppose one of the critical things going forward was how the COVID vaccines work, and how much that allows the economy to unlock. We're expecting that to be successful, and therefore growth to be quite good through 2021. And there is signs in the market that expectation and comments from the Bank of England have pushed up gilt yields, and that pushes up borrowing costs. You're not impacted by that, but we have revised our forecast by about 30 basis points. So if you wish to borrow, it would be a bit more expensive. I won't go through all the other economic information in there. Safe to say that the world economy has suffered. China has fully recovered from its COVID crisis, but there are still parts of the global economy that is suffering from restrictions in place from COVID, and that will continue for some time. And therefore economic growth will be weaker. In terms of section 2.1, that just shows our current forecast at the point of time we submitted the report to you as members. That has changed subtly. Bank rate hasn't changed. Our expectation for investment return hasn't changed. But if you looked at borrowing costs in here and you looked at our new forecast, which was released yesterday, there'd be about 30 basis points different. So instead of being able to borrow at 160, if you wish to, at 50 years, it will probably, we think, a sort of 190 in about 2 or 3 years' time. So a subtle change to that forecast, just to reflect the fact that we think economic growth will be a bit stronger. In terms of what your own strategy is, as I said before, you have security, liquidity, and yield as your key drivers. We may well see an environmental, social, and governance overlay to this. And we will be supporting clients to deliver that. So if they are using any counterparties, we will look at the ESG criteria, and if you wish to continue using those going forward. There is a full list of investments as at 30th of September 2020 and 31st of December 2020 in Appendix A in tables 1 and 1A. The average level of funds available for investment during quarters 2 was 46.8 million and 46.8 as at the end of quarter 1 was 42. So you have had a slightly higher level of cash balance to invest. You did outperform the 3-month benchmarks by 38 basis points in quarter 2 and 28 basis points in quarter 3. And there are some useful charts in the appendices to show you how you've outperformed benchmarks. And the relative outperformance, even though interest rates are lower, has been a similar level you were performing before the crisis. So you are performing a positive return, but it's just lower because where bank rate has moved to, and it's difficult for your officers to achieve a significant return on investment when you're investing in the short term. In terms of negative rates, we don't think that will come through. If it did, unfortunately, you'll have a situation, particularly at the short end, that you would be paying someone to hold the money while you wait for it to be returned to you. So there will be a cost of that coming forward if that were to be brought in. In terms of the borrowing strategy, as Amy indicated, you haven't borrowed for quite a number of years, and prior to that you did lock into some longer term loans for your long term assets at rates that were competitive then, but obviously during that period we've seen a significant change to the UK economy, and rates have been cut to historical low points, so we are at very, very low rates now. Your current borrowing stands at 25.3 million. It's expected to move down to 24.8. It does have an average life of 24.7 years, so the average rate at 4.24 would be paid until those loans mature, or we can reschedule out of them. And the premium at the moment to repay your PWLB loans on maturity would be about £20 million. So I can send some examples through to how some specific loans might work through to repay early and refinance, but that high premium makes it a whole life cost rather than a benefit, and it's not really viable or a good use of public funds to try and reschedule their loans. And the idea would be you would just hold them until maturity and repay them without penalty costs. So there's been no loan rescheduling carried out, but no new borrowing done either, because you've been moving to using your own resources instead of borrowing. And that strategy will continue for the foreseeable future, my understanding. So you'll see those loans gradually fall away and no more debt being taken on for the time being. In terms of one thing you will see in the report is a big change to where interest rates have moved for PWLB. The Chancellor announced in the spending review in November that they would reduce PWLB borrowing rates for general fund activity, which your authority would fall under, by 100 basis points. So they fell by 1% during that period. So prior to the change, the highest rate had been 271 for 50-year money. It's fallen as low as 132 following that cut in interest rates, so very low, but the average has been around 226. So whilst your interest rates are high on your borrowing cost, relatively, I mean, at 271, it was still quite expensive compared to where we are now. It just looks very cheap now. And then the borrowing in advance of need, you've done no borrowing in advance of need during Q2 and 3, which is a control that SIPFA keep under review. And in summary and conclusion, in compliance with the SIPFA Code of Practice on Treasury Management, the report provides the committee with the second and third quarter report on Treasury Management activities up to the period of December 2020. You've breached none of your prudential indicators, and you've carried out a prudent approach to investment, focusing on security and liquidity over yield, and you've carried out no new borrowing, and borrowing is expected to fall down to a level of around, like I say, 24.8 million, I think it is, by the end of the year. And that concludes my overview of that report.
Thank you very much indeed, Adam. Great deal of information, as you and your team normally do. So please pass on my thanks to your team and yourself for all the detailed reports. It is interesting to hear what's going on in other places as well. So thank you for that. I haven't had any indications that anyone's got a question to ask on the paper. So
happy to propose a recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? If not, I'll do that. In fact, I will second. Item agenda number 9, the recommendations. Could we please all indicate if we're happy visually to accept the report?
That's carried, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, everyone. Item agenda number 10, the financial performance report 2020-21 quarters 2 and 3 are pages 183 to 198 in our pack. I believe Andrew is going to lead us through that. Is that correct?
Yes. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members.
Good morning, Andrew. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for taking us through the report.
You're very welcome. Again, this is quarter 2 and quarter 3 report, so different to the normal report you would see. But I'll only specifically mention quarter 3, whether the quarter 2 comparisons are included within the appendix at the back, should you need to see those. So a positive, we're forecasting a positive outturn position of a £1.2 million underspend, as can be seen on page 186. At this stage, there are no recommendations on what to do with that underspend due to the uncertainty surrounding COVID. There are a couple of underspends that I was going to specifically look at. The first one is paragraph 3.1, underspend on service delivery staff of £0.404 million. Majority of that is a reduction in activity for on-call staff. Very difficult to predict that activity, and also a slight delay in recruitment for the whole time. And also within there is the £1.442 million that we'd put in to pay for availability. We're now asking or seeking approval to move that into an earmark reserve, which we'll go through later on table 3. That £1.442 million has been included in the outturn to give you a true reflection. The other paragraph I wanted to specifically mention is 3.11, additional income we've received. It was mentioned previously about the COVID. We have received £1.318 million of government grant to help us through the COVID situation. Just want to put on record our thanks to Amy at the time. She was seconded to the OGA, and certainly she got involved in securing funding for the whole of the fire sector within England. So many thanks to Amy. So we received £1.318 million for that. And again, there is a table further on in the report where we discuss the COVID situation, the COVID grant, and what we spent that money on. So I'm just going to pause for questions. Has anybody got any questions on any other sections within the outturn report?
Just whilst people are thinking if they've got a question, I've got a quick question actually there on page 189, 3.15, the budget transfers. How long can we keep them there? Is there a time limit, or is it an indefinite period?
It's an indefinite period. Thankfully, as long as we use it for what you agree for it to be used for. So I can move on to table 3 on page 189 if you wish. We do want to move £1.442 million into an earmark reserve to help us fund pay for availability. As members will remember, we were hoping to introduce pay for availability this year, but that's been delayed. So we are bringing on stations online on a voluntary basis at the moment. We've had some early adopters, which is really positive. So this will help us fund future year costs. There is an additional cost to pay for availability. However, I need to remind members that the devolve limit for the Resources Committee is £1 million. So we're just asking for a recommendation to move this to the full authority meeting in a couple of weeks' time.
Thank you, Andrew, for that. That's good. I've got Councillor Wheeler would like to ask a question, followed by Councillor Biedermann. So, Councillor Wheeler, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, please, Chair. There's several items on table 2 where we've got the month 9 has already exceeded the projected outturn. I'd like to ask about them. The training investment spending to month 9 is 587, and the projected outturn is 493. How are we spending less in the final quarter, please?
There's a cost there associated with the Severn Park Training Centre. So those costs get moved out at the end of the financial year. It's just an accounting treatment that we have to do, so, because part of that is classed as a capital item. So that's the reason why, Councillor Wheeler.
Okay, thank you. Item 10, running costs and insurances.
Yes, so we pay for insurance for the whole year in November for 12 months, but obviously part of that cost relates to the next financial year. So when it comes to March, we do what we call a payment in advance, and we move those costs from this year into next year for those following 7 months.
Okay, thank you. And that covers line 21 as well, I think. So
yes.
That was it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you very much. Councillor Biedermann, would you like to ask your question, please?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andrew. Obviously, line 11, George nearly got that. Item 11, travel and subsistence, is sort of after. I just can't quite understand why we've not saved more. I just don't imagine many people are travelling or thing, and then there's suddenly a really big dip. Because we're at the moment 400,000 underspent, and then we're only going to be 93,000 at the end. So where's everybody suddenly travelling to in the next 3 months?
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. You're quite right in what you say, that most people are working from home, but obviously for the majority of our staff, we don't pay their commute fees. However, perversely, COVID has brought some additional pressures on us in the fact that people can no longer travel together in the same vehicle. So if we've got courses for firefighters to make sure that they're in the licence, they have to travel independently to that course, which means we've had to increase our cost for hire cars.
Going back on that then, Chair.
Yes, of course you can.
Thank you. Is it less value then to hire a car for them to travel, or to pay them to use their own vehicle to travel to training?
We will look at all opportunities. So obviously the first port of call is to use any service vehicles that are available and free to use. So that would be the option. And ordinarily they would do that, use a station van and travel together. Another option, depending on the mileage, sometimes it's cheaper to hire, sometimes it's cheaper to ask the firefighters to use their own vehicles, but quite often that's not achievable and they've only got one family car and that's needed elsewhere within the family. But we will look at all those 3 options, Councillor Biedermann.
I'm still surprised that they're travelling to training courses, given that our training investment has also dropped. So I'm assuming the training's dropped because of the COVID situation.
So the training investment doesn't cover the cost of the operational licenses for our staff. It covers the investment in development of staff. So if, for instance, I was going to do a master's, then that would come out of that line rather than the development. Sorry, the operational licenses for our operational staff. That's covered as part of salaries because our trainers are staff.
Thank you. I do like your background. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Does anyone else have any questions at all for Andrew? I'm not getting any indications that we do. So item agenda 10 on.
Shall I move on?
Page... Yep. Okay.
Okay, brilliant. So as I say, table 3, it's below it's above the de minimis value for the Resources Committee. So it's just there to note to say we'll push that on to the Fire Authority if you agree to that. A quick one on reserves and provisions. As you can see, we've got adequate reserves, and someone mentioned reserves previously, but we're looking or forecasting to spend more on reserves this year than actually coming into the reserves. So we've got an expenditure of 5.840 million forecast, majority of which is on our capital programme, which we'll cover in a minute. And just for completeness, members, we already see the fourth and bottom line there. That's the pay for availability reserve. We've got a proposal over 1.442 million, which ties back to that budget environment request that we just discussed. So that's shown in that table as well for completeness. Okay, table 5, which is paragraph 5.4 on page 190. One apologies. This is the grant funding we talked about previously for COVID. So in this financial year, we've received £1.383 million. When the report was formatted and written, I was anticipating an underspend of about 220,000, that is. That figure is probably going to reduce considerably because we've been involved and engaged in the vaccination program. So quite a few members of our staff have actually volunteered to go onto that vaccination program to assist the community. So I anticipate we will not be in a 220 underspend position at the end of the financial year, but I don't know the true figure at this time. No, nationally, we are engaging on potential possible future funding. What we don't want to do is to stop funding, stop us supporting the response within the community. So we will start lobbying when necessary if we feel that 220 has disappeared, but we need some additional funding to help community support as far as COVID is concerned. Okay, moving on to the capital programme. So the table on 6.5, this has been talked about previously within the capital strategy that Amy discussed. So we've got some positive news in the fact that Brixham should be handed back to us within Q1 this year, which is fantastic news. And we've also started at Plymstock, so the old station has been demolished at Plymstock. The crew have moved to a temporary station, and the contractors arrived on site in January to start the rebuild of the new station there. There has been some timing differences and delays on improvements and structural maintenance, mainly down to the resources available within the Estates Department because they have been tied up within our COVID response, but they will move on to the new financial year. Appliance replacement, again, has been discussed previously. So I'm pleased to say we've got 15 of the medium rescue pumps, the MRPs. Those chassis have arrived within emergency 1. They've been inspected and they've been approved, and we've paid for those. Those 15 at emergency 1 are now paid for. And on top of that, the first 4 have had their stage 2 inspected, which is what they call the fire engineering stage. So that's the water tank, the pump, etc. on the back. They've been inspected and approved, and they've been paid for as well. Spoke to the fleet manager this morning. He's anticipating the first 5 MRPs. If everything goes to plan, will be with us before the end of March and end of next month. And on top of that, they're also expecting the first 5 rapid intervention vehicles, so the smaller fire engines. Those chassis will be at emergency 1 again before the end of March. So things are moving on quite quickly as far as the fleet replacement program is concerned, notwithstanding all those delays we had in the supply chain because of COVID. And as you can see, that we'll still be using some of the earmark reserve funding. So we will be dipping into some of the funding that we've got in our earmark reserve. We still need some of that in this financial year, even though there's been some delays in the capital programme. So are there any questions on the capital programme?
Councillor Bearderman, did you have a question on that?
Well, sorry, Chair. Andrew snuck in a little bit extra after my last question on the table 5, and I just wanted to go back to that. And
okay.
Sort of, yeah, I mean, I think that it's fantastic, isn't it, for us to be supporting the community and especially with the vaccination programme, it's been a tremendous success.
Yep.
Obviously, that money then will disappear, but I was sort of surprised that we were having to fund I mean, it's great that we're releasing staff to go and do it, which is part of it. But how? Because my understanding is the CCGs are obviously getting funding to carry out the vaccination programme. So would they not be sort of making a donation to our coffers for that? I know it's all the same money in the end, but just showing it on our lines. But yeah, yeah, just how do we sort of? I mean, it's good all around, isn't it? Really, because obviously it just shows the value of the service and how important it is to protect and have firefighters there ready to act at all sorts of eventualities in the community.
Absolutely. If I'm honest, I don't know the detail on the CCJ or CG, but Lee might be able to add a little bit, because I know he's volunteered at some of the sites for marshalling. But just to add a little bit there, Councillor Beedham, the fact that obviously we've supplied 20 drivers to the SWAS, to the Ambulance Service Trust, to provide drivers for them to ease their pressures. We do claim money back from SWAS because they've got funding for that. So if there's an opportunity to claim the funding back, we do so. But like I said, I'm not 100% sure on the CCG funding, so I couldn't answer that.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Sorry, I've got sound problems. Sorry, I think so. I'll stop my video, but hopefully everyone can still hear me. No, absolutely. This is a whole partnership-based approach, and we have to work really closely with colleagues. And the arrangements are all coordinated through the local resilience forums, and so we're very much plugged into that arrangement. So essentially, we will only support partners if they want us to, and we do that through an agreed arrangement. So the arrangement we've got with in terms of deploying those staff, most of those ambulance service drivers are on-call firefighters that are undertaking additional activity for us, and as such, we need to pay them, and that money is coming from the COVID grant. And we've also got a discussion that continues with SWAST as well, in terms of recouping some of those costs. So the key issue really is that if we were using whole-time firefighters and redirecting those firefighters, they're already being paid, so there wouldn't be a cost. But we need those firefighters to do fire rescue service work for us. But there is also some wider context that's been heavily covered in the news recently in terms of whether or not firefighters want to volunteer to undertake this activity or not. So in short, what we do, we seek when there is a request for assistance, we have a list of volunteers that are prepared to put themselves forward to undertake this activity. And if that activity is additional activity for them, and we wouldn't ordinarily be paying for that, we will pay them and then draw that down from the grant, if that helps. But where we can direct staff, as Andrew said, I and a number of other colleagues put themselves forward to go down to support the testing arrangements for the mass vaccination centre in Exeter. As it happens, not all of us were needed, but that comes at no additional cost because I'm already being paid. Where we are using staff that ordinarily are only responding to emergencies, so our on-call staff, clearly if they're going to give up a day's work for us, then we will pay them and draw that down from the grant. So I hope that helps, but happy to address any follow-ups.
Thank you very much. Is that it, Councillor Beedham? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you, Lee. I just would hate to see us have to pass any money back to the government because we haven't spent it when we've actually been doing the work. But I'm sure that Amy, Andrew, and their team will make sure that all our activities are accounted for and paid for. Thank you. It's hard enough to get money out of them in the first place, isn't it?
Thanks very much. Andrew, is that the end of the report?
No, if I can move on, members, to section 7, and I start off with an apology. The figures quoted in the report are actually incorrect. Me and my team did some work and reviewed and reconciled the debt position, and we realised there's some unallocated cash receipts, and also there was a 27,000 contribution towards Red One, which I think this committee approved at the last meeting to assist with their staff that couldn't be furloughed. So the figures quoted in this report are actually incorrect. So if I may, I'll go through those and give you an updated position. So total amount of debt outstanding at the end of Q3 was actually 948,105, not the 112,944 quoted. Move on to table in 7.2. The current figure is slightly higher, which is 82,172, not 80542 as reported. So that's 82172. The 1 to 28 days overdue is actually 82,294, 82,294, so less than we reported. 29 days to 56, 57 to 84 are correct. There is 0 outstanding there, and the over 85 due is actually 786,639, 786,639. So 150 grand less than we've reported there. Like I say, I can only apologise for that. So table 8 and 7.3 has also changed. The Red One outstanding debt has actually come down. It's 769,456, 769,456. Sam, have you got your finger up?
Yes, Chair, through you. I was just going to ask Andrew if you could email me those figures, then I will circulate them to members of the committee for clarity.
Of course, no problem at all.
Thank you, Sam.
I can only apologise for that. Like I say, it's an omission within me and my team, so I take full responsibility for that. Moving on then, potential indicators, Appendix A. The good news is, as Adam mentioned, we haven't breached any of our prudential indicators, which is really good. And just to answer a question that Councillor Peart asked previously, bottom of page 194 does show our debt position, the percentages of when those debts are the debt is due repayment. It's a percentage, not a value, but it gives you a rough indication of the span we've got of our debt portfolio currently. So back to you, Chair, for any questions and then recommendations on page 183.
Thank you very much indeed, Andrew. And I've just got at the moment Councillor Wheeler. I have no one else. So Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about Table 8 and the various invoices with small debtors. I guess that sometimes these will be, we won't be able to collect these. Is there a writing off process, please?
The various small ones, one of those, almost half of that is one single supplier, one single debtor we've got. Who actually was doing a conversion on one of our vehicles and a part was stolen from the base of it. So we're actively pursuing that through our debt management agent as we speak. So I'm hopeful we won't have to write any of those off. But we will do a full review at the end of the financial year, as we always do anyway, to ensure there's no bad debt provision increase.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wheeler, and thank you, Andrew. I'm not getting any indications anyone else has got a question to ask. So I will propose the recommendation.
Second, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Coles. Could I ask all those that are in agreement to show visually, please, that we agree?
Six. That's 7-4 carried unanimously, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, everyone. Thank you for that. So that brings us to item number 11. Councillor Cole.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Item 11, which is the exclusion of the press and public, and the recommendation that I propose is that, in accordance with Section 100A, Section 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public, with the exception of officers of Red One Limited and Councillors Saywell and Thomas, authority-appointed non-executive directors of the Board of Red One Limited, be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in the following paragraph of Part 1 of Schedule 12A as amended of the Act. Paragraph 3, information relating to financial and business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. I so propose.
Seconded.
Okay, everybody in agreement?
All those please show visually.
That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, could I suggest we take a brief break, please? We've been going for 2 hours, and I think 1 hour is the recommended time before taking a break.
Chair, we do need to finish this meeting and obviously bring in Red 1 for the part 2 meeting. So could I suggest a 10-minute break, if that's acceptable to everybody, and we recommence at 12:20?
Yeah, Councillor Wheeler beat me to it, actually. I was just going to ask, did anyone need a break before we go to the second part? So is everyone in agreement 10 minutes is sufficient?
Aye.
Can I just check we're still on this link?
Yes.
So we will be on a different link. There is a different invitation for the part 2 meeting. So we will end this meeting because we need to end the live stream initially and then restart the part 2 meeting on a different link, which should be in your calendar.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
So I declare the meeting closed.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. See you shortly.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.